If I say the words porn star biographer, who do you picture? Maybe a squat, middle-aged guy wearing 70s sunglasses and a shiny shirt, or a sexuality studies professor from some eminent university? Well, how about a married mother of two from Burlington, Ontario, with a previous career in hearing instrument distribution? Jill Nelson is the co-author of a new book called John Holmes, A Life Measured in Inches. It bills itself as the definitive biography of Holmes, a country boy from Ohio who rose to fame in the 70s and 80s, starring in over 2,500 pornographic films. He was perhaps most famous for the porn series revolving around the private detective character Johnny Wad. Well, actually, correction, he was most famous for his private parts, said to measure somewhere between 12 and 16 inches, considered to be the most substantial in the biz. Yet beyond his on-screen life as the king, John Holmes lived a life that was out of control. His story inspired the 1997 film Boogie Nights, starring Mark Wahlberg, and the 2003 Val Kilmer feature Wonderland, about John Holmes' puzzling involvement in the brutal Wonderland murders of 1981. So what beyond the excesses and the sordid surface drew Jill Nelson to researching and co-writing a biography of John Holmes? Well, she's here with me in Studio Q. Hello, Jill.
Hello.
Very nice to meet you.
You too.
Now, you didn't have any previous affiliation with the porn industry, and you weren't a fan of blue movies. Why did you, the proverbial happily married suburban mother of two, get involved in, not that there's any disconnect between that and porn, but get involved in this project?
Well, I like a challenge. I had rented the film Wonderland. My husband and I rented the film Wonderland in late 2005, and I thought it was very interesting that although the film did depict the brutal murders, I don't know how appropriately they were depicted through, I guess, the eyes of the director. James Cox was trying to show a certain point of view, provided to him by one of the detectives, Tom Lang, and also John's wife at the time, Sharon Holmes, and Dawn. I just thought it was interesting that it was really only a snapshot of his life. I thought, what else went on? This guy was a porn star. He was legendary. And yet all we're seeing, which of course the film was only supposed to be about this time in his life, but all we were seeing or being, privy to was what went down with the murders. And the secondary story in the film was John's connection with his wife, Sharon, who was obviously still very devoted to him, and one of his mistresses at the time, Dawn Schiller. And the three seemed to share this amicable relationship. And I was just really fascinated. I wanted to learn more of the details of John's life. Again, the film didn't really reveal those.
And so you didn't know much about him before that?
No, I didn't. I knew his name.
I
knew his name, really. I knew that he was well endowed, but apart from that, I really wasn't familiar with him.
So where do you go from this interest, based on seeing this film Wonderland, to this very comprehensive, research study of the life of John Holmes?
It wasn't something I set out to do. I just started reading about John online, and I connected with, actually, the book's originator, Jennifer Sugar, 26-year-old Jennifer Sugar, who resides in Michigan. And we connected and started writing, and she informed me that she was writing the definitive book about John Holmes. And she started off the same way I did. She'd seen the film Wonderland. She walked out of it and said, I'll never watch a John Holmes film. Well, within a week, she'd rented 3, and she became very intrigued. And she was working on the book, and we were writing. And after about a year, she was attending university at the time. She realized it was too daunting of a task to really complete on her own, and invited me to join her. And it just happened sort of that way, by osmosis.
And this is a 582-page book. It's being described as the definitive biography. 35 interviews, over 100 reviews of his most notable films, several photos, a filmography. What was it like for you to immerse yourself in his milieu and to be interviewing almost every major figure in John Holmes's life?
It was truly a wonderful experience because although I considered myself to be liberated during the 70s, I never would have chosen to become a sex performer on screen or anything like that. But it was really interesting because a lot of the women, for example, that we talked to, and some of the men, John's leading ladies, they're around my age, and yet they had really done something that was considered to be, because these taboo, because acting in these films, it was illegal at the entire time that John worked for 20 years. The films were illegal, and yet they were doing this and really putting themselves out there. And that was fascinating. So I kind of felt like I was living vicariously through them. And what I learned from my experience is that they're people just like the rest of us. They chose this path, and but at the end of the day, they're just like the rest of us. And actually, when we had our book launch in August in Los Angeles, friends of ours, my friend is here today, Lynn and her husband, came, and they said the same thing that we did. Wow, these people could be our next door neighbors.
And
so
your
really
friends and neighbors have been very supportive of you.
They have
this
been.
project for you.
Yeah, they have been. At first, my daughter, who was 17 at the time, she was a little, Mom, why do you have to write about a porn star? But you don't always choose things. Sometimes they just come along, and you're just interested and intrigued.
But I dare say you're sympathetic to John Holmes. It's at times an affectionate portrayal of
at times.
Yep. You describe John Holmes as an erotic film star,
yes,
not a pornographer.
He was a pornographer, but I think when you were trying to sell the story to people who are mainstream readers like I was prior to embarking upon this project, the term pornography has such a negative stigma. People think of something really crass. They think of something ugly. And truthfully, at the time that John worked, during what was called the golden age of films, John really was an erotic performer. He prepared his partners for their scenes. He really paid attention to the women's feelings. I'm not saying that he always exercised that kind of sensitivity in his personal life, but he certainly did on screen. And watching his films, we did review 200 films and loops, and really a lot of John's stuff is very palatable to watch. And that's why I do call him an erotic performer.
And in contradistinction to what you would see today in porn, you're saying?
I haven't watched a lot of what's out there today, but what I have seen, I think it's very different. First of all, they have Viagra, which the men working during John's time did not have. And it's just, I don't know, there's a lot of augmentation done. It's just very different. The people who worked during John's time, they were people like you and I. They didn't look sort of enhanced. They just looked like regular people.
You're saying I don't look enhanced?
You look great.
There's a lot of, I guess a lot of people know the story of John Holmes, or they think they do from Boogie Nights, and from there's still a lot of myths surrounding him, and then there's the mystery of his later life and the Wonderland murders. What was your biggest revelation about him going through all this research?
My biggest revelation was I knew about the Wonderland murders after having seen the film, and then after I rented Boogie Nights. So I knew about the dark sides of John's life. What I didn't know is that he was a godfather to 3 children. I didn't know that he was a stepfather. And these 4 children loved him very much, and it was mutual. And so what I learned and what Jennifer learned, we really learned more of the softer side of John Holmes, which is why we wanted to present a balanced account of his life.